Welcome to the Philadelphia chapter of the International Institute of Business Analysis. We have a wonderful speaker today. Her name is Deirdre Caren, and she will be talking on tips and best practices for using AI in business requirement processes. So I only just have one announcement. By the way, my co-president, Mary Ellen, is not here today. She got a present of a vacation, so she went ahead and went on it. It was for her birthday. I wanted to remind everybody that IIBA has a job board. If you haven't seen it, I want to just show you real quick. Yeah, yeah, this is on the IIBA website, and they have postings from all over the world actually, and I just think it's something that you might be find some resources on. But of course, we have our sponsor from Jill. Where did you go? There, from Interpro. There she is, up in the upper right-hand corner. So anyway, that's the only announcements we really have today. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Glenn Hughes, our Vice President of Education, to introduce our speaker and give us a little bit of information about her. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yes, so just a couple. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just a couple quick things. So for our December event, we will be hosting our 4th annual Recruiters Roundtable with IIBA sponsors who will offer insights on the top trends in the market and what they anticipate in store for 2024. For next year, we're looking into talks on blockchain, introduction to Power BI, and data modeling. So stay tuned for that. Just going to do my usual shout out for our LinkedIn page. That's the IIBA Philadelphia chapter. Please feel free to send an invite request. Also, please feel free to use it as a platform for collaboration. And I always try to post some sort of BA related article every week. As Lorraine mentioned, we have sponsors, and Interpros is one of those. As always, we would like to thank our sponsors for their support. So I guess, Jill, I know you're on the line. Do you have anything you want to say before we get started?
Yeah, well, just thank you to the board and Deirdre for putting together this amazing event. Again, if you're on the lookout for work or just want to chat about your resume, as always, please feel free to reach out to me or Chris Freeman from Interpros. I'll throw my email in the chat. But thank you again.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So on to today's topic, tips and best practices for using AI in business requirements process. So as the founder and director of Agora Insights, Deirdre Caren brings to the table more than 25 years of comprehensive hands-on business delivery experience. Her knowledge base extends across business architectural design, strategic analysis, requirements, integrated systems, learning methodologies, certification, and a spectrum of related fields. Throughout her tenure, she has had the privilege of empowering thousands of business professionals, architects, and analysts, and aided them in their professional progression through a robust blend of tailored training programs, personalized mentoring, and consulting solutions. Because of her passion for these fields, she continues to learn, contribute, and build the business architecture and analyst communities globally. So, Deirdre, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Now, in New Zealand, we typically are humble. And so the big introductions like that are quite uncomfortable, but I was told that I have a very diverse audience, and I should probably do that. I'm going to share my screen now. And we're going to talk about requirements, but I'm going to talk about requirements for analysts and architecture and various other bits and pieces. Thanks for the introduction. Mostly what I like to say is I help business analysts and business architects from all over the world achieve their learning goals. And we work with different companies from around the world. Now, I just want to ask, before we get into the requirements and the AI and all of these components, who was around? I know it's going to get your age out there, but who was around in year 2000? Do you remember Y2K? There you go, Alan. Couple of you, Donna. Yeah. So there was this big thing about, basically the world's going to end in 2000 because of our data, and all of our systems didn't have the date stamp of 2000. And I remember I had started a small business that year, well, not that year, 3 years prior, and staying up all midnight celebrating the millennial, doing help desk for the business, and nothing happened. And then we started moving to cloud in the 2010, more or less. I could be wrong of the exact dates, but everyone was like, people are going to steal all of our data and all of this stuff's going to happen. And now we don't even think about it. Then not so long ago, we went into a global pandemic, and we all started using online services like Zoom, working from home, massive change in the organization. And the reason I'm telling you this is because often when people hear about new things, it becomes scary, but mostly because we just don't know what they are. And so I'm hoping to clarify that AI, well, at least now, isn't scary. Who knows what could happen in the future? But it's really something that you can use in your everyday work. And just as we knew in 2000 that was a waste of worry, and we knew with cloud it was also a waste of worry. And I'm not saying there aren't risks. I'm not trying to minimize some of these challenges in migrating these systems, but certainly your AI is going to become a reality in your role and in your business, and it's going to happen very soon. And so, for instance, I'm going to roll back a little bit further. In 1993, they launched the internet. I like to call it the interweb because people didn't know what the World Wide Web was and the internet. And everyone was asking, would it kick off? And nowadays we use the internet basically for everything, right? But all I want to do with saying that is that the speed at which our websites and our internet and our access and all of that has grown over the last 30 years from 93 to 23, AI is going to grow 7 times faster than that. You can expect AI to grow to the level that we are today, with using online services, to take 4.3 years. So it's quite important we understand what this is and what does that mean, because it is hugely prevalent and it's going to just get bigger. It's not going to disappear anytime soon. So I'm going to talk about architecture. Analysts, don't worry. This isn't changing your jobs. I just want to talk about the structure of AI, the structure of the business, and understanding the requirements in a specific way. And so this will absolutely align with your role as analyst. But when we talk about AI, we've got to talk about the business, the whole business, not a particular, project that we're working on, because requirements is just about a particular project, but it has to be in the context of a business. And so I can't do requirements for my company based on somebody else's requirements, right? It has to be based on the requirements that I need for my organization. And typically we have some kind of architecture to do that. So I'm just going to give you an overview so that you understand what we're doing. And please, if you feel like asking questions as we go through the process and clarifying some things, feel free to put your hand up and just talk through the process, or create some chat links. I don't know if you can do that or not. Okay, and I'll give you some tips on how to use AI effectively to help you with requirements at the end of the day. So all businesses have architecture. Not all businesses have been architected. There's a really big difference. You will see this in houses too. You can see when you've got a really good architecture in a house, it just works. But when you have, a couple of mates building a house together, it's probably not the best design you could have. So what we want to do is we want to understand, with all the changes and things that are happening, what does our business look like? What are all the parts of our organization that we need to understand so that AI can understand the business that we're working in? And there's lots of digital change and enhancement all over the place. So what do I mean? Business analysts, when we do requirements, we deep dive into a problem. So we look, okay, we're having this particular, sorry, I've got some noise in the background. I think, Nadia, there's some feedback. If you wouldn't mind.
Excuse me.
If you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Appreciate that. I keep thinking someone's asking me a question. So yeah. So if you look at a business analyst, I almost say a business analyst is almost like an investigative journalist. You've got to find a whole lot of information. You've got to investigate. You've got to find the problem. You've got to make recommendations. And then you've got to write about the requirements. You've got to say what's required to change the situation that we find. When we look at architecture, on the other hand, we're looking at a bird's eye view and we're going, okay, how does the business work? What is the ecosystem of the organization? What are the different things that the organization does? What do the stakeholders do? What do our policies do? What do our systems do? And so we look at it from a bird's eye perspective. And the reason we do that is also because we don't want multiple projects to be working in multiple different areas, but they're the same thing. We try to avoid that. We try focus on, let's say, a stream of work rather than just focusing on one particular aspect of the work. So when we look at the role of the architect or business architect, that person would look at the breadth of the organization, would want to understand, what is the ecosystem of my company? What does my company do? How does my company work? What is important to my company? And then the business analyst would deep dive and go, okay, I want to fix this problem that my company is having, or manage a change component of what my company is going through, and we need requirements to be able to make the change. So the two work hand in hand is what I'm saying. Working on their own can be challenging, and most projects do it that way, unfortunately. But hopefully you have some kind of architecture, and even if you don't, it's important to understand what AI can or cannot do for you. So in reality, unlike that beautiful picture I showed you before, mostly what our organization looks like is a lot like this. It's complicated. There's lots of systems. There's lots of processes. There's lots of things that we do. There's multiple business units, and they're all trying to achieve something. And we cannot really express what we need to change. And so often what happens to us as business analysts when we ask to do requirements, you just go, you know what, I just don't have the bandwidth to understand how the organization is working. And therefore, we'll just focus on this little piece here and we'll try to fix that. Meantime, somebody's doing something that's the exact opposite in this side of the organization. So what we try to do as architects is we try to simplify this process. Now in AI is already good at understanding this. But it's not good at knowing what's important and what isn't important. So when we look to make changes in our organization, it's really important that we understand what is important and what isn't important and how those changes would work. I'll also discuss some limitations with AI because that's pretty important. Now, we recently had BA Day on the 1st of November for those who celebrated it in some form. Last year, there was a post that the IIBA put up which said a business analyst is someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by those with questionable knowledge. So when I say I've been boots on the ground, I kid you not, a lot of these experiences, and this is the nice thing, when I meet other analysts, I know that they've had similar experiences. So it's a global thing. It's not a New Zealand thing or a particular area or business. But Daniel, who's a good friend and colleague, he said, it sounds less accurate if a decent business architecture practice is in place to assist business analysts with the description of requirements, epics, and user stories. Okay, so I've given you a very short overview of architecture just to lead into the discussion of AI and Daniel's comments around if you have some kind of architecture in place, the systems and what we do, it makes building those requirements much simpler. So let me go to the next level. Now, as business analysts, I like to compare what business architects do and what business analysts do in projects. And I like metaphors, and I'm sorry if I use several metaphors in the explanation, but hopefully you can stick on my pathway, what my mind's up to. That's a bit of a mess itself. But so I often say, you can imagine business architecture almost like a library. What we try to do is we try to organize the organization. We're not trying to manage every data. We're just saying, when you come into the library, you know where to find a particular book. Now, for those who are old enough again, who were around when libraries were the way to search for information, you would go to the librarian and the librarian would say to you, what kind of book are you looking at, and would direct you based on a catalog that they had of the information. And so with architecture, we do something very similar. We look at all the parts of our organization and we catalog and we categorize it, and we make sense out of the chaos that we have. Whereas a business analyst is analyzing. And I know not every business analyst gets to analyze. Often you just have to catch all the trouble that we have in projects and talk to multiple stakeholders all the time. But ideally, you would be looking at the information that we have in the organization and you'd be analyzing that information. And again, it leans to that investigative journalist type of thinking. You're trying to find root to the data that you're looking at. So in all of this conversation, I want you to imagine that for AI to do your job as a business analyst, doing requirements, it needs a library. And you can use ChatGPT and you can use all of those things and ask it to do user stories and requirements, and it's pretty good at it. But it won't necessarily be right for you. And what's happening with AI is we're looking at ways in which to create the catalog and the structure in the library. So almost mimicking exactly what libraries are and were, so that the AI can do its job of managing the data. It can go and investigate the information, the data that there is in the organization and provide you with the books. It's not going to do the job of analyzing the context of the organization, but it's going to tell you what books you should find and what information that you need. So I'm going to run through a bit of a simulation of what this means. Are there any questions? Because I know that some of these concepts are new to people. Don't feel worried. It took me months to figure this out when I first started. If you have questions, now's a good time to ask.
Um,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to see an example, but I think you're going to give us an example. So that was really going to be my question.
Yeah. So I want you to keep in the back of the mind that your business will need to have its own library, which is all the components of the architecture that we put together and catalog and categorize, because AI needs a library to work, right? It needs information and data to be able to help you do requirements. It can't think. It doesn't really understand context. So although it can contextualize things, it doesn't have the ability that analysts have to go, oh, hang on, did we forget so and so? In the requirements, your AI is not that good at it. So, all right. So rules with AI. If you're going to use AI like ChatGPT, there's several models, by the way. So ChatGPT is part of OpenAI, and there is GPT-4 models. My favorite is Anthropic, which is Claude 2. I also use, they allow you to ask it more information. So it gives you a lot, it's got a bigger library, put it that way, or library space. There's also something called, I'm using Poe. There is also, what is it? Perplexity, which is really nice. That looks up for references. So you can find links, you can find all of that with ChatGPT, and those ones are not really good at. They don't have current data. Whereas Perplexity will look up, if you say, I need to find a venue for blah, it's really good at doing those kind of things. But if you want to do requirements, so you can choose which model. GPT-4 is really good. And as I said, Claude 2 is really good, my preference. So when we want to create a requirement for the business, let's say you want to change to, let's say you're having trouble with your brand, and I'm going to use brand as, so you've got a company, but your brand, your icon is old-fashioned and you don't want to work with it. AI needs to know about this because the requirement it creates has to be associated with that. So it requires context. It needs to understand its role. And I think this is so hilarious. AI is not good at giving you good information if it doesn't know what its job is. And so we have something that we call prompt engineering, which is a very fancy word for a job description. And the job description cannot be exhaustive, so it can't be too long. It doesn't really understand too much. But what you're doing is you're constraining it and you're saying, this is your job and this is what you have to produce. And it understands that really well, because otherwise, mostly, especially with ChatGPT, it's the worst of the lot with this. It thinks it's a marketing manager or a salesperson because the stuff it pulls out is not very helpful to a lot of organizations. So rather look at it from a, what is the job that you want this bot to perform? So what most bots, if you choose to use a bot, you should describe what the role of that bot is, and it's limited to that role. It needs to understand the principles of architecture. So at the moment, you don't need to understand that, but it's helpful in terms of understanding what all of the components of architecture, and that's just the principles. It doesn't have to be the entire organization. It's just, it needs to understand how you're structured as an organization. It needs to understand structured outputs. So when you say you want a strategy, or when you say you want to use a story, you need to describe what you're expecting. So a user story is global and everyone knows what that looks like, and it's pretty good at that. But if you want a particular type of template or document for it to produce, you have to put that into its job description. So it's prompt. It needs to create containers of requirements. So it needs to create, like I use the library example. You need a pack of information that will relate to the subject you're studying, right? Or the requirements you're studying. So it needs to understand what it's got to find. So does it have to find information about stakeholders? Does it have to find information about your policies, your data? Because remember, these are all parts of requirements. Your systems that you're using, it needs to understand that. And then it needs to have good inputs to frame the architecture. Now, saying all of this, you can play with it and create user stories today and have a bit of fun. This is why I say you can still play on the playground and you're not going to break anything. So don't worry. Y2K didn't come, and neither will this. You're not going to break it. You might mess up its reasoning a bit, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to show you, I have taken some architectural information from a fictional case called Supreme Coffee. And this fictional case is a local Kiwi coffee shop, New Zealand coffee shop, that is wanting to franchise globally. But in order to franchise globally, it wants to update its brand. And so the brand, it's not a global looking brand. So the first thing that I've asked it to do, let me push play. My mouse doesn't shout at me, is I've asked it to collect. So I call it a requirements container, but I've asked it to go into the library and collect some information that I have in my library, which is just Excel spreadsheets, nothing fancy. In this case, I converted to a Word document, and pull together some categories of what we do. So we're looking at brand management. There's a description of brand management. Sorry, let me pause. Ability to establish, organize, analyze, administer, and report on all aspects of a name, symbol, or design. So remember, in business analysis, we have what we call business requirements. So this aligns with that concept of business requirement, which is the high level. It's not exactly the same, so bear with me, but it's very similar. And then we look at some key objects, which would be, we'd have brand guidelines that would be like documents and various types of, and let's get on a little bit. And then we'd look at including things like, what outcomes do we want? We'd look at our state. It's not really relevant right now. And we'd look at our stakeholders. Now think of user stories. We'd need to understand, what's that collection, what's involved. So we want to change the brand, and that's basically what I fed it. I said, here's our library, find out information about brand and changing brand, pull that out of the library, and now put it in. I want you to create 20 user stories. And it does this really well. So as you can see, as a brand manager, I want brand guidelines enforced, so my brand identity is consistent. Look how we've got a traceability here. It's telling us where this information is found. Now, Babok does recommend that you have traceability. So a user story is linked to another user story, or is linked to a functional requirement, is linked to a business requirement. So it does do this tracing really well. And as you can see, it looks at all the stakeholders that were mentioned, what we're trying to achieve as a brand, and pulling all that information together. So I was super happy about this. I thought, wow. But with AI, the real thing you have to be aware of is what you feed it. What are you giving it to get you great outputs? So then I said, okay, for the first user story, the one that I showed you previously, create some acceptance criteria. And there it said, brand guidelines, documents exist, contains visual, blah. It's done a really good job based on the architecture that we have. And so it's given some acceptance criteria. Of course, although I've done this in 8 minutes all up, you will have to validate and verify this with stakeholders, right? 7.2 of your BABA guide, 7.3 of your BABA guide. This is going to be the most important thing because AI does make mistakes. It's not human and it doesn't understand and have the knowledge and experience that we have. Okay, so while I was blabbing, what it did then, based on the acceptance criteria, it did some functional requirements. And so as you can see, it said, this is the system shall allow brand managers to create, update, and publish brand guidelines. And there is the acceptance criteria number, and it's gone all the way through. So of course, you're going to have to validate and verify this information to make sure that it's correct. And by the way, you can run this many times. I always advise you to do this over and over and get as much, like go for much and rather refine than go for too little and not cover all of it. Because, let me explain why. AI can only handle so much data at a time. So the one that I use can handle about, well, they call it 100,000 tokens. So the entire chat is about 75 pages. I think that's right. I could be wrong. But that's the amount of information you're feeding it and getting back from it. So just bear that in mind. If it has too much information, it hallucinates and it starts making stuff up. It's a really weird thing. And one of the weird things I had, one of my experiences was it told me to find another chatbot because it had had enough. I just asked it to do a strategy and it told me I must find another bot. I was like, wow. Oh gosh. Okay, so what it did when it did non-functional requirements is it actually created all about systems. So I asked it to create non-functional requirements that are, non-functional requirements that is not related to the system. So I'm sorry, I don't know why the button keeps clicking on the wrong thing. So I've gone for non-functional requirements. I asked it to update to not only show me the system, and now it's showing me more non-functional requirements. Remember, we have the requirements schema. So you have business requirements, user requirements, or stakeholder requirements. Then we have solution requirements, functional, non-functional. And this is on one user story. Look at how much data we have on one user story. So you can imagine, now I've asked it for transitional requirements, which it's given me. And then I decided I wanted more requirements, user stories, sorry. And I now have another, so all up I have 40 requirements, user stories, apology. So I was really happy with the output. They were unique, they were atomic, they met the requirements that you have, in terms of how you write it. And it had a traceability back to the architecture reference, which was really good. I do have to advise you that you have to train the bot to do these things. So it's important. It will give you stuff because it's smart, but it won't necessarily give you the stuff in the way that you want it if you don't describe clearly what you want. Now I've asked it for a value stream and using the information that was sent through. And this means it's like a process. It's not a process. It's just like if we were to change our brand, how would we change it? So what is happening here is, let's say we have a project now that we want to initiate. We would have deliver consistent brand experience. We'd have the list of stakeholders, or in this case, stakeholder groups that would be affected by the brand experience. And it seems quite quick. These would be the stages of the project, of what you're delivering, and what would be the outcomes. And we use this as the architectural term. So it was really very good in being able to take the information and say, this is what we would need to do in order to reach this. And this is where we're starting to get a sense of what the solution requirements might be. We've already done some solution, but how would we match these? So based on, let's say, what we want to achieve as a project, I've asked it to cross-map those steps with the user stories. So what user stories at what stages in the project of improving the brand would we be using? So, and again, it's just going to give us a simple example. So when we are developing the brand strategy, these would be the user stories we need to consider. When we are creating brand guidelines, these user stories, notice the traceability. So it's looked through the whole set that I've provided, and then continuing and improving the brand strategy. These would be the user stories involved. And remember, we did on one of them, we did do the acceptance criteria and the functional and non-functional requirements. Obviously, it'd be helpful to be able to share what systems you use in the organization to help with those solution requirements. Now I said, how long do you estimate it would take to implement this, considering the number of stakeholders that there are involved? And so work through this. So as you can see, it's made a recommendation of, if there were 10 key stakeholders or 20 or 40 stakeholders across the corporate. And remember, stakeholders, according to Babak, is a generic term, like how we would use it. You can go into more detail, but it's used in a similar type of format. So I asked it to take, this and go a step further, and asked it to take just the 10 stakeholders, not 40 stakeholders, and estimate the tasks that would be involved in changing the brand for the organization. And remember, the organization is this coffee shop, so Supreme Coffee. So it's made some assumptions on the roles, and it's looked particularly at teams rather than particular job titles. And these would be the teams you'd have to source. So I was pretty happy with that. And then I said, provide an initiative rollout plan or roadmap, sorry. And so this is all from the user stories and from the architecture kind of library and the high-level business requirements set that we created, or requirements architecture. And so it's given me an idea based on what I have on how long these things would take. Of course, I haven't validated or verified all of it, but at face value, I was pretty happy with the outcome, and I gave it a like. And it's good practice to do that, because then it knows it's done a good job. And it then ranks that response higher in the system. And it works the opposite way too. If you rank it low, it kind of drops it. So it's also learning the whole time. It is a learning model. All right. So quite simply, as you can see, very short prompts based on our business architecture knowledge base and asking it to classify some information. Yeah, is that a question or was it a
Yes,
heads up?
it may be too soon, but this set of requirements is for business action.
Yeah.
Most of the time working as a business analyst, my requirements were for either new systems or for system modification. And in this case, say, for example, if it says we want a brand image, that would be about maybe a website. It might be about typeface. It might, in the case of it being coffee, it might be recipes. It might be some kind of signs. It might be some sort of furniture or appearance of the coffee shop. And so these requirements are the kind of requirements, in my understanding, that you would give to a person, because you can't code this, and I don't see how it would connect to some sort of data, even high level data, because the details of this, as you know, as much as I know about branding, which isn't a whole lot, but you would have a certain image, you would have a certain typeface, you would have certain images,
Yes.
right? That sort of a thing. And it doesn't seem possible with what I'm seeing here for AI to know, where's the specs for the picture, how big is it supposed to be, what little pictures are in it, what are the colors. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you would actually have to do if you were doing a brand. And so I don't see where these excellent, really high level requirements that you would give to a human, I don't see how you would connect it to an actual systems or a database, something like that. Maybe I don't understand this.
You can.
Yeah,
you
okay.
can. So it can pull it. When I talk about the requirements architecture, you can absolutely pull from a database, and it can go down to infinite level of detail. You can't provide it too much detail, so you have to batch it. So like I did there, and this was just a short example, it's not going to take you 8 minutes, right? It's going to take you longer, but it'll be quicker than trying to gather all the information from everyone. This was just one user story that we went through this process, right? You're going to have a whole lot more user stories that you'll have to do the functional requirements for, things like the logo. Second thing, and I will get to you in a minute, Alan. Second thing that you mentioned was the images and all of that. AI can read that now. It's actually unbelievable. So you have to use GPT-4 for that, but you can upload a document and it will just upload an image and it will describe that image. It doesn't always get it correct, but it will, and it can create the requirements. So I've had some limited time to show you all of it, but everything you mentioned we can do using AI.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Alan.
And one more follow-up, but I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. I've actually done very simple requests to have it create code based on a business scenario that I fed it, and it basically really did work. Yeah, you have to review it to make sure it's correct, and it actually got the logic correct. There were some syntax errors, but who doesn't do that? And conversely, I also fed it some code from a language that's not used too much, Progress. Fed it a short bit of code and said, what does this do? And it was able to analyze it, and it got it right. So it all depends on exactly what you're prompting for.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I say putting in the right questions and feeding it the right data, it'll actually give you a lot of information. Did you want to continue on that other conversation, or no? Okay.
Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's all right. So I've just given you a sample of consider the principles of what I've done here is to give it context. So, in Babak Guide, we talk about Backham, where you have to have the need, the context, the value, the stakeholders, the solution. You're trying to understand the context of what we do and what we're looking for. AI is really good at understanding that if you give it to it. So it's about feeding it the right information so that you can work through that. It won't understand knowledge yet. It doesn't understand that. So you will have to go through that and validate it and go, oh, hang on, this definitely hasn't got this right yet. I started really working with this very actively in February this year. And the rate of the improvement, things like images, it can now hear you. So you can tell it something and it can draw a diagram for you. I tested it this morning. I did a presentation and I said, create the diagrams for the presentation because I thought there's no ways it's going to get it right. It wasn't my style, but it was really good. I was pretty shocked, to be honest. So the rate of it growing is huge. It's huge. Anybody else have some experiences with AI they want to share to the group and we can discuss before I go into the last little bit of it? Okay. Yeah, so this always becomes about the user. Okay. So if you are a bad user and you ask bad questions, and hopefully as a BA, you do ask good questions, you're going to get bad outputs. It's as simple as that, right? So let's discuss what AI can do for you and what it cannot do for you. And I want to just highlight that this means right now. It might change next year, right? It's moving that quickly and going that fast. So it doesn't really understand complexity and nuances. So very similar to what you were saying around understanding some of the depth and breadth and why people do things. It's looking at your data. It's reasoning your data. It is a language model. It converts its understanding of the words that you use into more words or images or whatever content. So it doesn't really understand why you might rate some things higher than other things, why you might prioritize things. So sometimes it's not worth asking it to do complex, big projects all at once. It makes more sense that you ask it small questions and you keep building on the context yourself. AI's other limitation, which is looking at these kind of things around the difficulty in understanding context, is it can only manage a certain amount of data at a time. So that's a current limitation. I imagine that will change very soon. But the reason why it has that limitation, and this was the interesting thing I found out, is because of the processing on the computer systems. They actually use a lot of energy to process because it's searching billions and billions of data sources in seconds. And so they've got these massive machines that are processing these data sets and these tokens and all of that. And the machines are working like crazy. Some of them are actually in liquid to keep cool. So this is why we have a limit on the amount of questions we can ask it and the amount of information we can feed back, but it's still looking at its universe of data. Building the table incrementally. So when you try and build things like tables and using sets of data, it's not really good at that. Like if you give it unstructured information, like a Word document or something, it's actually much better than trying to give it Excel spreadsheets and templates. Again, this will change very soon, but I did find that, trying to create tables on ChatGPT or one of those platforms was a real pain. AI repeated certain mistakes. So this is what is called hallucination. When you feed it too much information, and remember you're feeding it and it's providing you, it's the whole collective, it starts hallucinating, and then it starts making errors, and then it repeats the errors and it gets confused. And as complexity increases, the performance degrades. So again, you got to feed it nuggets of information, and then it goes to its universe and it gives you the answers. And it's pretty smart. So despite challenges, I cannot deny the benefits of AI. A massive amount of time saving, whether you're writing a blog, whether you are sending out emails, whether you are preparing training material, all of those kind of things. It's a really great, what I call a digital assistant to help you do these things. You have to check it. It's not like you can just walk away and put it in there, and actually if you read it, it's a bunch of junk. You still have to check it, but it makes life a lot quicker. And at the beginning of this chat, I was just saying, I shared some with my mom, and she's busy writing, her books and her memoirs and those kind of things with Chat GPT. So it's not difficult to learn and use. The difficulty in the beginning was teaching how to write a good instruction for the bots, so that you get the best kind of output and that you provide it with the right information. So really, you will need to have a deep understanding of business architecture principles to truly maximize the benefits. This doesn't mean you have to go and become an architect. It just means you have to understand some of the key areas that we cover in order to make sure that the holistic view and even that detailed view in terms of what you offer, the data that you have in your organization is used. One thing I do advise is be careful of trying to use your day-to-day data in an organization, because there's so much shadowware, there's so much redundant data, there's so much incorrect data. So you want to use specific things like a product catalog, for instance, or a particular system that you're using. So remember at the beginning, I said we try simplify that really ugly diagram and keep it very kind of more abstract and simplified, and provide the information on those key points rather than risking putting bad data into the AI, and then you're just going to get bad data out. So for business analysts, did you have a question?
Yes, is that okay? Or am I?
Yeah, go for it.
So when you talk about absorbing the business architecture, now typically business architecture is presented in diagrams. Like you have a process model and a data model, and there would be descriptions, of course. But my first question is, can it understand them and know it? Does it know that if a box, one box is on the left and the box on the right to it, that's a process and one comes before the other. And the other thing is that there will be documents and there'll be homonyms, and like a funny one is that banks call a stockboard an instrument, but other people call an instrument as a clarinet or something like that. And so that's an extreme example. But if your architecture says there's such a thing, I'm trying to think of an example with your coffee. There's such a thing as a kind of coffee recipe, right? Then you wanted to know what are the things you need to know about a coffee recipe, yes. But maybe somebody else calls it, I don't know, there's another word for coffee. There's a different term for it, yes. And I mean that's the kind of thing that people mess up on that too. But I'm just wondering about how to put it in words. But how can it look at a diagram and know what the structure of it means, and can it relate the concepts in that diagram with written verbiage, that kind of thing?
So 2 questions. I'll start with the first one. in architecture, we actually build a lot of tables and data and we visualize it. So although what you see with architecture is usually visualizations, we actually have the data at the back of it in usually tables and I wouldn't say spreadsheets, but it could be in Archimate or various other things. And all it's doing is visualizing the data. So you don't need that anymore, really. So it's not so much a problem what end user sees the visualization, but it's not what's actually in the back end. So for the architecture. Secondly, you make a very good point about the glossary of terms. And I'm using that particularly because I think that's what I heard when you said that.
Yes.
Yeah. So absolutely, this is why having a key, what we call information concepts, and a glossary of what our business terms certain things, like what do we mean when we say customer? What do we mean when we say enterprise? Babok is really good at structuring this, actually, giving the definitions of all these different things. So we would have to have something like that in our library so that AI knows the difference of what our company terms a recipe versus McDonald's having a recipe. Would have to be able to tell that difference. So yeah, we have something called, let me just quickly go. When we talk about our architecture, we look at the capabilities of the organization, the value streams, the initiatives, the products, the stakeholders, the policies, and then we talk about information, and that involves a glossary of terms that we use. And then we look at the organization. So when we build the architecture, we try to find this information from the data sets that we have. And of course, like I said, you can add the policies, you can add products, you can add anything really. You can add applications, all of that can work, but we try to keep it simple because we're trying to avoid this with AI. It has a vast universe of information, but we want to give it a simple set of information so that it can draw from that information. And that would include having specific business terms and a glossary.
Okay. Thanks.
Good. Yeah, so just to close off, you're not going to lose your job to AI. And it's not difficult to use. If I have to speak in layman's terms, you go and you try it out, you ask us some questions and you play. And you just enjoy what you might get out. And it could be anything from writing your own book to writing requirements. And when you want to scale up, you'll have an idea of how it works. The advice that I give you is that you give it good instructions and that you ask good questions. So everything you have to do as a business analyst anyway. And so the way that you structure your information, the way that you structure what outputs you want, and then for those who eventually want to get very robust with their business and how they're doing their architecture, it makes a lot of sense for you to, look at your requirements as a holistic thing and get the most out of that. Now, there are some data concerns, like, are you sharing it onto the platform? No, not really. People don't, the bot is not using your information. It's taken its information. There are terms and conditions on there that they've updated recently. It's taken its information to make it relevant for what you've sent it, but it doesn't store your information. So that's good. But obviously businesses are still concerned. So what a lot of businesses do is they put AI into their Azure or their various own platforms so that it doesn't leak. Not that I think it will, but that's why. That's why it's structured that way. So it really is a valuable tool and it will change. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with everything you said based on just the little bit that I've used it. And the way I view it overall is it's a great time saver and gives you a really good head start on whatever you're working on, but you can't rely on it to do the whole thing for you.
Awesome. I'm glad someone's confirmed it. Yeah, but it really does reduce some of your, let's say, mundane work or things that you might forget and go, hey, I didn't know that this is even I forgot about this. I should have thought about it. So it's really good. So if you have some structured templates, some structured prompts, remember I said it's called prompt engineering, which is a fancy word for giving it a job title. The outcomes that you're expecting from that job, very simple job. If you learn how to do that and give it good instructions on what you're expecting, you can expect a good outcome. And once you've learned how to do that, then you can take it to the next level and look at it more from an enterprise point of view or an architecture point of view to say, okay, let's piece the pieces together so that the bot understands the context and why we need certain things and how we would do that. And you might have to use it over and over again in different chats, because remember I said it's got a content limit. So you might ask it to do one full set of requirements for one small user story, and then you might open up another chat and it needs to learn again. So it can be a little bit long, but start in the basics, just play. And then from there, you can go from there. Okay, so just to finish up, because I can see the time now, we do have some learning bots for you. So anyone who's studying is completely free. Don't worry, there's no strings attached. We have created some bots to help you prepare for your ECBA, CCBA, and CIBA exams. If you ask it bad questions, you're going to get bad answers. So just keep that in mind. And so if you are preparing for your exams, you can ask it to create scenarios for you, explain what the questions are. My team will send some links on how to find that. You have two options. You can use the standard GPT free options, or you can use one that's ranked higher, like a GPT-4 or Claude 2. We don't get anything out of it, but it is an option for you to use if you want a higher ranking performance for the requirements. So it will help you with that. So it's on our website. You have to go through a little bit of a process so we can explain what it is you need to do. And from there, you can download some of our materials, again, completely free, and you can use them in preparation for your exams. So there's a bit of bonus after the long AI conversation. And that's me.
And it was so different from what I thought it would be. So,
really, what do you mean?
Well, I guess I can't really even put it into words. I thought of it before of more answering textual questions, that sort of a thing. Yeah, I guess I just didn't really know what it did.
Do you feel like it's given you some clarity, or is there still some things that you would want to know? Because now's a good time to ask, I suppose.
It opens up some wonderful questions that I'd like to fool around with to see how it does.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's not a scary space. There's no Y2K, there's no cloud destroying, and working from home is not going to, end the universe. So it's the same thing. It's a helpful tool. Obviously, how people use it is the outcome that they're going to get at the end of the day. But it is really good, and it's worth exploring earlier than later, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
so anybody else have comments or questions or anything?
Such a quiet crew today.
I guess they all understood everything.
No questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. I thought the presentation was so fabulous and I learned a lot. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome, Jill. And there's Jack.
Jack.
Hi, I actually do have a question. Thank you so much for speaking. I thought it was really insightful. I'm someone who's very bullish on AI, but also wanted to ask you about maybe the ethical considerations, particularly as it relates to plagiarism and critical thinking. Um, it can be easy to resort to AI to come up with a lot of creative solutions, and just want to balance the two.
Yeah, these are really good questions, sometimes a little bit more philosophical than real. But I agree on private content. One of the things that we're doing as a team is we're going to start gating our content just because you don't know, right? So you're still drawing feedback from the universe of AI, and that's based on old data. So it's important to understand that AIs captured everything we've done over however many years now, and it's put it into this huge big database. And it reasons based on history. But that doesn't mean it's based in reality of today and our context today. And this is why it's really important. So there are risks. And when we look at plagiarism, gosh, I think even without AI, there's so much plagiarism. I've had literally articles that I see somebody has copied, and I'm like, and this, I actually know the people, and so whether this is what I'm trying to say, AI is a tool and human behavior is really difficult to manage. Of course, having AI, you can plagiarize and do a lot of things way quicker. So I always think it's really good that as individuals, we have to manage our reputation, and people do go to the source. If they know, like if some random person approaches you and goes, this is how you should be using AI, you're going to question their role and where they come from, and, who are they and why should I listen to you? Especially on things like Facebook. At the moment, actually, so Jack, I'm spreading this a little bit, but I hope that this makes sense. On Facebook, you'll see these ads, right? And you'll see all these images that look like normal people doing stuff. Meanwhile, they've copied the image, they've created voices, they're doing all of that. So I always say, what's the thing? There's one military saying, be concerned, or something. Don't worry, but be concerned. Something like that. I don't quite know how the saying. I should have tried to remember that. But you should be vigilant in understanding your source of information and how true it is. And that's why I mentioned that I use a tool called Perplexity that looks at academic resources. It looks at where do you find information, so that it's not just made up, and that the source of that information is clearly found at the end of the day. So there are ways in which you can do that. But bear in mind, there are risks, like there were with everything that we've gone through with transformation all through the ages. And I wish people didn't steal, and I wish people didn't copy, but it wouldn't matter if it's AI or a book. It's the same thing, really.
That's a great point. Thank you. I think it's if you're calm, you should be worried. If you're worried, you should be calm. Along those lines. Thanks again.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, this was really a great presentation. Really appreciate it, Deirdre. Oh, something about the website of Agora. There'll be a place to see something. Yeah, that's a great thing also. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I will make sure that the team does communicate that with everybody. So please make in your email, I think if you can just send out a link. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to send out all these links personally, but my team are really good. If you need any help or assistance, do just contact them. Yeah, we're happy to help.
Well, thank you very much, Deirdre, and thank you for all of our members for joining today. It was a really great meeting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the invite.